Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's CITI program webinar. Today's topic is working with your IRB and is presented by Dr. Angela L. Bruch. Now, let me tell you about today's presenter, Dr. Angela L. Bruch. Angela began her career as a business school administrator, but found that what she loved most was teaching and research that were then a small part of her role. Ultimately, she returned to school and earned a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. Angela has been an IRB chair for a solely virtual IRB for 8 years. In addition to her role, she also teaches research and psychology courses at Capella University.
So today, we'll begin just with a brief coverage of the learning objectives. We're going to discuss effective communication strategies for students and faculty to work with their IRB. We'll describe how to respond to an IRB request and identify important deadlines and dates in the IRB processes. We'll also review what needs to be reported to the IRB and when. The focus of our presentation today really is on protocols that require a convened review. However, I hope you'll see that IRBs that use exempt or expedited options will find similar kinds of helpful information today as we go through things. The information about how to communicate and work with your IRB translates across all review types. It'll be important for you as the investigator to be sure you're familiar with what type of review your IRB will use for your protocol. So let's begin with an overview of the IRB review process for a protocol. Typically, the steps for the IRB review process look something like this. The researcher submits the protocol to the IRB reviews the protocol. The IRB then asks the researcher for any additional information or clarity as needed, and hopefully, ultimately, the IRB approves the protocol. So this tidy little flowchart has some little blue links between each of those steps, and those links really represent the communication flow that underlies the IRB review process. The communication between you and your IRB continues for the duration of the research study while it's under IRB oversight. So that would be amendments to your work, reportable events, and so forth. The large red arrow on the third step is there to remind us all that the interactions between the IRB and you regarding any additional, arguably, all good relationships begin with good communication, and your relationship with the IRB falls firmly into that guidance. Your relationship with the IRB is rooted in the language of the IRB. So to communicate effectively with your IRB, it's important to respond to exactly what is asked. Provide the information that's been requested. Depending on the meeting and review schedule of your IRB, timing might be very important, so be prompt in your response to their questions. If the IRB's request is unclear to you, it's time to ask questions. Before you submit or if a resubmission is necessary, double, triple, even quadruple check your work before you submit it. At times you may find you'll need to advocate for yourself. You may not understand a concern raised by the IRB, or you might disagree with the IRB's assessment. Asking the IRB to reframe or provide an example of what they need or a rationale for why they need it is a completely reasonable step on your behalf. If it seems like the IRB didn't understand your proposed research, go back. Look at what you submitted. Often documents might be unclear or so let's talk just a little bit about how to structure your response to the IRB. First, look at the exact wording of the IRB request and respond directly to that request. Keep it concise and focused. If you bring in new material or make changes not called for, be sure to communicate that that content is new for the IRB seeing it the first time. Please respond to all items that the IRB has asked for. Be clear even in a non-response. State that you are not responding to something and why you are not responding. You could note that you aren't responding because you don't know if you need more information or you're waiting on something from a sponsor, or that you disagree with a request and aren't going to update X item that they've requested, rather than just ignoring the request. On occasion, you may find you need to report something to the IRB, and so we'd like to talk a little bit about what you should report to the IRB and when you need to do so. Typically, each IRB has its own focused list of reportable events with guidance on how and when to report them. Often you'll find that guidance on your specific IRB's website or in their new researcher materials. Depending on the type of research you're doing and the type of reportable event associated with that research, the guidance on reporting may vary. If your research is governed by more than one IRB, you'll need to know the specific guidance on reporting and what's reportable for each individual IRB, and you'll have to comply with that specific guidance. Also, note that sponsored or funded research So as we come to the close of our formal presentation, and before we begin to answer your questions and visit a little more broadly, I just want to take a moment to summarize a few key points. In your communication with your IRB, the IRB that reviews your materials, be timely, seek clarity when needed, and be comfortable advocating for yourself and making sure that you understand what is needed and that the IRB understands your information. Respond to an IRB request using clarity, asking for clarity if it's needed, being expeditious and timely, and being sensitive to the IRB schedule. Be sure to identify important deadlines and dates in your IRB review process, and be attuned to what needs to be reported to the IRB and the essential timing of that reporting.
We now have some time for a few questions from the audience, and I'd also like to remind the audience, if you'd like to ask any questions, please post it to the Q&A on Zoom. The first question we have is, at my institution, the IRB won't take phone calls from researchers. What is the best way to connect with questions in that case?
That's an awesome question, and that is certainly the case in many IRBs. I would suggest that, as we noted, you go to your IRB materials, and there should be their preferred approach for contact for questions. It might be via a virtual chat that they have available, or simply an email through, or outreach rather, through email. But the key here always is to look at your own IRB's materials and preferences for how they can best interact with you, and follow their approach and guidance on how to work with them.
I invite you all to review our content offerings regularly, as we are continually adding new courses that may be of interest to you. All of our content is available to you all anytime through organizational and individual subscriptions.